Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very, very special episode of the Muscle Room Podcast as part of our ever-growing 9/11 series. We are here at the Flight 93 National Memorial. This is going to be the first of a few different episodes that we're going to be doing here in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This is something that we've been wanting to do for quite a while. And if you are watching on YouTube or another platform, what you see right now in the background, I'll take a quick little step to my left. You can see the actual impact zone, which is represented by this boulder behind me. And we have the great honor, privilege of being here. And we have Eric Potts finally back with the Muscle Room. You want to say hi, everybody?
Hey, it's great to be back, and I'm honored to be where we're at.
And this is the first Muscle Room podcast that we're doing that's actually a walk and talk. So if for those of you that are watching, I know we have a lot of listeners that are on Spotify or Apple Podcast. If you can, this is maybe one of the ones that you actually want to watch on YouTube or some other platform, because this episode in particular, there's going to be a lot of scenery in the background. And I think the symbolism of actually watching it's going to drive the point home. So
we want to make sure we thank the National Park Service for
absolutely. This is something that guys has said has been going on for about 2 years now, and we're finally here. It's August. We're only a few weeks away from the 24th anniversary of September 11th. And again, just thank you so much to the National Park Service. They were phenomenal, and we'll be hearing from them later today. So we're truly, truly looking forward to it. And to my left, to your right, the reason that we're even standing here right now is because actually this is not open to the public, and I want to make sure I mention that. This is a very special area. This is a sacred area. Only the family members of those who were perished on 9/11 here at the Flight 93 impact site are allowed to come here. So the reason that we're here right now standing on the sacred ground is because of this gentleman right here to my left against your right. And sir, go ahead and introduce yourself to all of our listeners right now.
I'm Ken Nacke. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And my brother, Louis Joseph Nacke II, was aboard Flight 93 on 9/11. And as you hear me talk through the podcast or this program I'm going to call him Joey. So Joey was the oldest of four. And it is truly an honor and a pleasure to get his story out and the story of the 40 heroes of Flight 93. And I appreciate you taking the time to tell the story, because how I look at it is you can't tell the story of September 11th without telling the story of all three sites. New York, the Pentagon, and of course here, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in Western Pennsylvania, Flight 93.
100%. And that's one of the reasons why we're here. We learned last year and the year prior doing all these 9/11 series that there are so many adults, U.S. Americans, who don't even know the story of Flight 93, let alone the kids, right? Let alone people across the world. But when we found out that there were Americans who don't know this story, that's when we said, we have to tell it. We have to come here and help the Park Service tell this story in a better way. And we're going to use social media to hopefully do that. And again, it's an honor. Let me just shake your hands. It's a true honor.
It's a pleasure being here, really. It truly is. Also, I'm a retired Baltimore County police officer. I did just under 34 years of service. And so we have that connection,
right?
And in the stories that go behind it and in the events. So
You said to us that you focus on the 40. But right now I want you to focus on Joe. Tell us a little bit about him.
Joey was the oldest of four. He was 42 years old when he passed away. You know what I mean? And what I want to get out first is Flight 93, the events of it, was not the defining moment on those 40 heroes or my brothers. It was just the ending of their life. They were truly amazing people to start up with. You know what I mean? I had the honor and the pleasure of walking in my brother's footsteps. He was 2 years older than me. So I actually had some of the same teachers, all the same coaches, all through, middle school, high school, and that, you know what I mean? So every time I'd walk into a classroom or I had a coach, they'd always say, "Oh, you're a Nacke. I hope you're as good as your brother. I hope you're as smart as your brother." You know what I mean? Telling you how good he was. And Joey, can you imagine? He found like weightlifting and powerlifting at an early age. Joey was about the same height as I was, but his chest size was two sizes of mine. You know what I mean? And he was just built, but he had that rugged exterior. Where next thing you know, as we were growing up through life, we always fought. And if you got brothers and sisters or siblings, you always fought. It was nothing like it. But then as we got older and started our own families, and we would, time and distance got between us. Every time we saw him, he'd grab you, put you in a headlock. Then he'd whisper in your ear, he goes, "Oh, I miss you and I love you." You kind of thing. So there's so many stories. We don't have enough time to tell you the stories of the things that we did together as growing up. Because like I said, it was an honor and a pleasure of following in his footsteps through life until, we started my own family.
Right. Well,
What put him on the plane then?
My brother was the director of warehousing for KB Toys, just out there in Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, not too far from New York. My dad always taught us that these core values, when you talk to someone, you look into them eye. When you meet someone for the first time, you give them a firm handshake, and your word is your bond. Those are the three things that my dad preached to us because he was an old military man. You know what I mean? So that was his culture. So they had a deal. They had a whole bunch of toys, like a lot of toys, that were shipped to the West Coast that never made it. So him still being the director of warehousing, he could say, "Okay, why don't you go? I'm the boss, I'll make you go." That's not him. So he just celebrated his 42nd birthday on September 9th. Coincidence. Also, he's getting ready to celebrate he just got remarried and was going to celebrate his wedding anniversary, which I think was on the 16th. So it's in between. So on September 10th, he decides to he made his flight arrangements to fly out, talk to the company who was supposed to have the call, then take the red eye back home. It was like a turn and burn kind of a trip. You know what I mean? Because his word is his bond. You know what I mean? I'm going to, I treat you with respect. Those things, that was his value, that core value, which is important in all of us. I'm not a big divine intervention guy, but you really think back about how many of the passengers or crew members that were making their travel arrangements that day made them at the last minute. You know what I mean? And as we're talking about the events of 9/11, this is actually the first battle won against a modern age of terrorism. You know what I mean? And we're police here. You know what I mean? I can remember going through a bomb school about terrorism, and we're talking about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. You know what I mean? Al Qaeda, patience. Here we are, 2001. So all that. But Joey would give you his last dollar out of his pocket. I can remember we moved around a lot. When we first moved to Baltimore, Maryland, we explored. So he goes, "Hey, let's go see what the city of Baltimore has to offer." We lived in Philadelphia. We lived in a small town only in New York where we grew up, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's what culture shock. You went to a town that had 17,000 people to the 7th largest city in Philadelphia and then moved to Baltimore. So, so we had to explore. So we're walking down the road down in Baltimore. Next thing you know, didn't know it, but Baltimore had a homeless problem like a lot of major cities do. So we're walking by and there was this guy sitting on the sidewalk and he got a sign saying, "Hey, can you give me some money for food?" So Joey taps me. He goes, "How much money you got in your pocket?" I think I had $2 or $3. We pooled our money. So instead of giving him the money, he goes and we walk up to a McDonald's. He buys him as much food as we can buy, comes back out and gives it to the guy. So he wanted something to eat. So this kind of gives you kind of a background.
what's the type of guy you're bro?
Type of guy he was. You know what I mean? Had a hardest exterior. He had that switch.
Right.
And you know what I mean when he's got that switch. He could be your best friend, but in a heartbeat, he could be your worst enemy. That's the kind of individual that he was, but had a heart of gold.
Wow. Married with kids?
Married, he has 2 boys. His youngest has lived with me for the last 14 years now. You know what I mean? It's just I'm his godfather, and nothing was going wrong. It's just that how to wanted to be an influence on his son's life. You know what I mean? Because my kids saw my brother as more than just Uncle Joey. Every time that we saw him, when we traveled together, we did vacations together. You know what I mean? He would come down and see my mom and dad almost every weekend or every other weekend. So my kids had the opportunity and the blessing to see him and have a special bond with him. So when they knew that Uncle Joey was in town, they were excited to hang out with him, wrestle with him. He would take them places. one time he always said growing up, he always wanted a red Corvette. You know what I mean? So now he's the director of warehousing for KB Toys, and now he's successful in his business life and in his personal life. I'm home and I'm working the midnight shift. Justin just got home from school. I have two kids, Courtney and Justin. My son's the oldest. Next thing you know, he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" He goes, "Have Justin out in front of your house in 15 minutes. I said, "Why?" He goes, "Just have him out there," and hangs up. So I said, "Hey, Justin, Uncle Joey's on his way." So I take him out. We're sitting on the sidewalk waiting for him to come up. Next thing you know, a half a mile away, I can hear the rumble of the car. Now it's starting to click in my mind what's going on, because Joey always said to Justin, "When I buy my Corvette, you'll be one of the first people to get a ride in it." Now he lives 2.5 hours away from me. So sure enough, here comes this flashy red Corvette, comes right up into our car, tolls around, rolls the window down and says, "Justin, get in." Not Kenny, get in, or how you doing? Justin, get in the car. Justin jumps in and they go for like a half an hour ride. Drops him back off, says he loves us, and goes on and goes back home, takes a 2.5 hour ride. That's what I mean. His word was his bond. And family meant more to him than anything else in this world.
How did the loss affect your parent?
Devastating.
I know that, but I mean, your mom, she came here. Was she angry, sad? What was she when she came to this?
Sad in the very beginning, and same thing with my dad. And I actually, once I learned about the events of September 11th, I actually had to work that day. You know what I mean? And a lot of people that don't know about the events, that Al-Qaeda had a miscommunication effort to tie up emergency services. So every major city on the East Coast was getting so many 911 calls, bomb threats, any type of threat they can come at that would keep your emergency services active. Well, I was assigned to SOD at that time. I was part of the tactical team and the K9 team, and I actually was trained to handle a bomb dog. So we actually have an airport in Baltimore County that actually houses A-10s and C-130s. Well, their control tower, right after me getting dressed to go out on my shift, watching the second plane actually strike the World Trade Center. And then our phone starts ringing saying, "Hey, we got a bomb threat down here at Martin's Air Force Base. You know what I mean? We need to send 2 dogs out there and clear it." So, our days go, you know what I mean? It was hectic, it was busy. But what I really remember, some of the strongest memories on September 11th, how blue the sky was. What a clear day it was. You couldn't ask for a picture perfect day. You know what I mean? For one of our darkest days. So driving out there, and as you guys know, that you turn off all your radio communication, your police radio, your cell phones, your whatever it is, you get within 500 yards, you're turning all that stuff off. So I get there, me and the other guy, we have to clear this, 3-4 structure building, just, which takes you an hour, 45 minutes. Leading up to going into that building, I knew nothing about Flight 93. I knew about the 2 planes that had struck the World Trade Center, and I believe I heard about the Pentagon, but had nothing about Flight 93 or the world out here in Western Pennsylvania. So I go in and do my job.
Question: did you know at this point that your brother was on a plane?
No.
You weren't even aware that he was flying that day?
No. And as we get done, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to clear the building. Came back out, loading my stuff back up in the truck, turned my cell phone back on, turned my police radio back on, and also the radio in my vehicle. Next thing you know, I hear about a plane crash being in Western Pennsylvania. Moments later, my cell phone starts ringing. And it's my wife, and she says, "I've been trying to call you for the last hour." I said, "Yeah, I'm busy at work." I said, I had to turn everything off. She goes, "Your dad just called me, and he says he believes Joey was on the flight that crashed in Winslow." How he knew, I have no idea. You know what I mean? But he told me that. And then I went right into denial mode. You know what I mean? That can't be, because I can count on one hand the amount of times that my brother professionally traveled for work in his professional career. That's rare, right? You're probably less than 1% of his work time was him traveling. So I went into denial mode. And then next thing you know, the police radio starts going off. Now you're hyper-focused. You got to go back and then So I have to go to another place to start doing. So we were busy. We were running from call to call. But every time I'd have that lull in between calls, you start thinking about it. And I don't know if you guys have brothers and sisters and families, but you know by the hair on the back of your neck, when it starts standing up and tingling, you know something's wrong. And I got that gut feeling in the pit of my stomach and the back of my neck. And when that started coming over me, I just said, hey, my parents live 2 hours away from me. I need to pack up. Take a whole different role now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Joey was the oldest of four. Now I inherited a new role. And I want to be down there for my mom and my dad. You know what I mean? I have no idea what it is like to lose a child, let alone your firstborn. So I was driven. So I called up Marcia. I said, pack me some clothes. I said, not even that. I said, meet me on the side of the highway. I called the guys I work with. I said, here, take my truck, take my bomb dog. I'm going down to see my mom and my dad. So I just traded off my police truck and equipment there, jumped in the car with my wife, and stayed in those clothes for like 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
Didn't pack nothing because it's 2 hours away. I wanted to get down to be where my mom and dad was if and when they got that call from United,
Right.
that saying that he was a confirmed passenger. Because leading up to it, you know, it wasn't confirmed. Because I'm asking my wife all those questions that I know she doesn't have the answer to, but I'm asking him. Did his wife call? Did his boys call? Is there anything on the news? Did United call? Did mom and dad got any other phone calls outside of what dad's feeling is, whatever conversation he had with Joey? All those things. And she was, I don't know. Which led me to make that decision. I can't do this. I got to be down there. You know what I mean? Put a different hat on.
So you're essentially responding to 9/11, but in the aspect in Baltimore.
Yeah.
How does that conversation go with your supervisor saying, hey, I know we're busy right now, but I got to go?
Supportive, you know what I mean? But also I've worked with these guys for years, you know what I mean? Actually my corporal, who was, because in K9, we didn't have sergeants, we had corporals, and he was my FTO. So I had the fortune, I said, hey, Jimmy, I said, this is what's happening. I got to go. And he says, meet me here, I'll take care of it, and I'll take care of everything else.
Right.
So I worked with a great bunch of guys within the brotherhood, you know what I mean, the teamwork, because you know, when you go into the special operation units or any specialized unit, it's a teamwork. It's all about the cohesiveness of the guys more so than it is the job and stuff like that. And I've been fortunate in my 34 years that I've been blessed with being a part of a great team.
Right.
They ran with it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I was very fortunate in how my guys took care of me and my department, so to speak. So I'm very lucky. So
let's do this. While we continue with the story, why don't we start walking towards the wall? So for those of you that are watching, this is not a public area that we're at right now. We're going to be walking on a gravel road. I'm not going to say too much about it. Just for security purposes, we were asked to leave a few things out by the National Park Service. But we're going to be walking up a gravel road momentarily, so you may hear some of that for those of you that are watching. And we're going to be walking essentially on the backside of the wall.
Yeah, this is actually, it's when the winning design was chosen for what a lot of people don't know, this is actually a national park.
Right.
With a memorial component built inside it. It's 22 acres long. So when the design concept was chosen, Paul Murdoch, the designer that won, actually put in an area for family members to come. It's a little shorter walk to get to the memorial aspect of it, but it also keeps you out of the public eye, so to speak. So very respectful about the emotions. And a lot of people throw these words out, closure. There is no such thing as closure when it comes to this. I grieve my brother every day. You know what I mean? But my dad told me something years and years ago, I think when my grandfather passed away. He says, make sure that we talk about our loved ones who passed because they continue to live within inside of us when you talk about it. And my kids, it's funny, my brother had like a saying, if it's free, it's for me. You know what I mean? So anytime they say, oh, it's free, Justin or Courtney or my nephew, they'd all say it together in unison, if it's free, it's for me. You know, Uncle Joey would say that. So keeping his memory alive. My dad passed away 6 weeks after my brother did. I always say he passed away of a broken heart, you know. And I can only imagine the stress that he went through, and my mom. You know what I mean? Like I said, we all suffer loss, and we've all seen loss, but I have no way I can quantify what a loss of a child would do. So, and you know, I would talk to my dad every day because unfortunately I had to go back to work. You know what I mean? I actually have a job. You know, not that there's a job, but also, you know, I committed to this field because I wanted to be a service. You know what I mean?
And this question was asked earlier before we turned the cameras on by Mark. You know, he said, what was your department's response? Once the department found out that your brother was on the flight, he perished along with the other 39 passengers and crew members, what did they say to you? Did they give you additional time off? Did they allow you to come here on job time? How did that look?
They gave me additional time off, but I think back in, you're going back to 2001, so you can't compare what they do today, what they did back then. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I only asked for the time that I needed. But once after the time that I got for my father, you know, they were 6 weeks apart. So they were very good with me in that time. But as it went along, anytime that I wanted to do something up here, I had to do my own time. You know what I mean? It was all. But again, I was working with great people where I say, hey, can we trade days? So, and that was outside of what, and I'm not talking bad about the police department. I think back in then, I think police departments were what I don't know is okay.
Right.
Kind of asked me, not saying anything negative.
Now, at this point, were you a homicide detective yet?
No, I was still an SOD. I finished SOD until I put my second police dog. He had to be put down and retired. And
how was it going back to work after all of this? How was it for you, trauma-wise?
I mean, I think and I say this to my daughter, I said, I think I'm a little wired differently than most people because I had that investigative mind. So instead of grieving, I wanted to learn about the events of September 11th. Why did it happen? How could it happen? How did we miss something? What did our government miss? You know what I mean? So you take that grief and I turned it into a drive to where I needed to learn about the events. Instead of grieving, I decided to do that.
Right.
You know, and that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I made. Instead of letting my emotions and grieving and go through with it, I went and wanted to learn as much as I can. So, you know, I reached out to the coroner. I reached out to, maybe take a step back. On September 13th, I'll even go back on September 12th, the family was all getting together and we were talking to my nephews up in Pennsylvania. And now I know I'm 4 hours away from the memorial or this area. Once I was able to collect my thoughts and get my wits around me, now I know my bearings. So I told my wife, I said, hook or by crook, I'm going to Western Pennsylvania. You know what I mean? I just, you know, like we all have to work holidays. My dad's birthday was on September 1st. Joey's birthday was on the 9th, and you got Labor Day thrown in there. So my wife and kids were able to go down and see my parents and Joey and everybody, but I couldn't go because I had to work the Labor Day weekend.
Which is probably one of the busiest weekends for any law enforcement agency across the country.
You know what I mean? So, and no one in my family really, and I respected that. They didn't get that, you know what I mean? These are, you know, we work weekends, we work holidays, we work 24 hours a day. And that's the commitment that I gave to be assigned to that unit.
Right.
So I said, look, I can't make it. So, you know, they were down there. So they actually got to say goodbye to Joey. I didn't. Wow. And, you know, it bit me in the ass, for better lack of a word, because, you know, it just jumps up and gets you. Those little things, you know. Didn't get to say happy birthday. No, I did on the phone, but it's not the same thing. Because a lot of times when I would, you know, being in SOD, you always work night work. You didn't work there. You didn't get the good hours. You were working at 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. or the overnight shift. So when I would get home off the midnight shift, the phone would ring, and he knew I'd answer it. I go, hello, and he go, ha, I woke you up, I love you, and I miss you, click. You know what I mean? But those are things that, you know, in hindsight, I miss now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so on September 12th, I was driven. There was nobody stopping me from coming out here. So I told the family, I said, look, you guys can go home. You know, my sister and my little brother. I said, you take care of mom and dad. I'm heading west. So the decision was, if Kenny's going, we're all going. And we're going to travel as a herd, the Nacke family. So I figured out how to get from point A to point B. And as I'm riding across the thing, I called up my unit up. I said, hey, I'm going to Western Pennsylvania. I need to get out here. Can you reach out to the state police? Let them know that I'm coming. Give those guys a whole lot of credit, because they called a whole bunch of people. And we stayed up in a resort out here about 40 minutes away, where United was putting us around from the public eye and being sheltered. At the time, you don't know what, you have ever things you got to have security thought of, the press and all that kind of stuff about, it's one of the darkest days in our country's history. It ranks up there with, Pearl Harbor and some of the assassinations over time. So you can imagine. So, but also, my mom and dad were just Catholic, and they believe this is where my brother's being is, or his soul is. This is his final resting place. So they would on it like a flower or something like that, just brought up to let Joey know in his spirit that they were here. Does that kind of make sense to people?
Of course.
That's just that. So once they told me that, I was driven, and nobody was stopping me hook or by crook. You know what I mean? Because I'm just wired that way. So I got out of here as soon as we pulled up into Seven Springs. I'm there probably a half an hour. Next thing you know, here comes a Pennsylvania trooper. He goes, are you Ken Nacke? I says, yeah. He goes, come with me. So he actually drives me out here. I get taken up to right up here is where the Western Overlook is. I guess Steve will probably show you that later on. It gives you an idea of where all the family members were brought the following days of September 11th. And he brought me out here. And it was, like I said, it was one of the surreal things. I have no idea where I'm at, driving through these back roads, but I just got that feeling in the back of my neck that I'm getting close to where this happened at. Yeah.
Paint the picture for all of our viewers. What was it like on September, you said 13th? What did this area look like? Obviously, it's much different now.
Pretty much, believe it or not, if you take away the structures, the actual landscape is still the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? A little bit more higher grass and stuff like that. But if you could imagine, so they brought me in, and I was met by a captain with the state police, who I'm still friends with, and a major. And the major really said some really important words to me. He said, get your tears out here so you can be strong for your mom and your dad and the rest of your family. Which, you know what I mean, didn't make any sense to me when he first said it. But then once I rounded the corner and started looking at the FBI and the NTSB investigators work in the actual scene, it clicked.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't think it would be that emotional for me, but it was.
And what did the crash site actually look like?
If you can go back to seeing the actual pictures, it actually, I could see the impact crater. It was still smoldering. I could see the wind impacts, the wing impacts. The strong smell, and I still smell it to this day, is jet fuel. I mean, every time I visit now over time, I come here, my mind tells me that I'm smelling jet fuel, even though there is no smell of jet fuel. That's just the effects that moment had on me. Those are the things that I pick up. And it was a clear day. I mean, it was pretty much like today. And I'm just looking at it, and I also know it's an active crime scene. Going forward, now that I know that a lot of the evidence that was recovered here at this crash site led to determining who was responsible for it. Credit card. You know what I mean? That was the banking information, which led down to the financial arm that led to the whole event of 9/11.
So let me ask you a question. When you're down here at the crash site on the 13th, are you trying to have to fight between being a law enforcement officer, but also being the family member of someone who was on that plane? Was your mind thinking about the crime scene as a law enforcement officer, or what was your mind going through as you're?
I was torn.
It's a different perspective.
Yeah. So I think that's where I go back to saying that I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I swallowed being a family member, you know what I mean, and held it. So, because I had an opportunity to talk to an FBI agent, I was able to talk to an NTSBS guy who would answer my questions. You know what I mean? They actually took me into their little command post, showed me the seating chart. There's probably, I've forgotten more things that they actually showed me just, you know what I mean, over time in that aspect of it. But they treated me with the greatest respect, but also was willing to share information.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys remember, you got to remember, my dad's greatest fear was that Flight 93 was shot down. So once he knew where I was going, he goes, I want you to ask that guy that question. So,
I think
you know what I mean?
And it's actually very important to bring up. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that always involve 9/11.
Right.
And when we actually posted on social media just a few days ago that we were coming here, it was a gentleman. I'm not going to give him any, credit to who he is, but he replied that it was shot down, and he was saying it was the president, the vice president. I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth, right? And we get that all the time in New York City. All that there were bombs inside the buildings, and that's what brought down the building. And again, couldn't be further from the truth. So I think it's always important to bring up conspiracy theories and how they're just wrong.
They're all
when
wrong.
it comes to anything involving 9/11.
And what's really wrong is because the truly amazing thing about Flight 93 is 40 individuals reacted to a crisis that most people couldn't recover from in 30 minutes. You're all in police work. I can remember planning raids that we had to do, and not one of them went like we planned. There was always something that went wrong. The 40 heroes, and that's the only word I'll ever use. You use something else, and especially if you use the V word for victim, I'm going to chew your head off, because these individuals gave their lives so we can continue to live our lives like it's September 10th. And that's the way we honor the actions of those 40. No ifs and buts. And you can even say it for the policemen and the firemen that ran into the World Trade Center. They gave their lives so we can continue to live our lives. That's important. That's one of the strongest, I hope people, when they leave Flight 93 Memorial, that they get that I matter and my decisions matter. And I always say to people when you're out here, when I'm talking to school groups especially, because, we got a full generation now that wasn't even born during 9/11 or the events of it. And it's not even being taught in school.
There's cops and firemen that are
coming on the job.
Born
Right.
9/11.
So, and I always say, look around. Look at us right here. And imagine that you're on a plane flying 40 people on a large plane, then all of a sudden a hijacking takes place. Back then, you were told to sit there, be quiet, we're going to be hostage off for some negotiation. It's not like today. You can't just single out anybody, because I kind of correlate the passengers and crew members of Flight 93 as a spear. You got certain components. You got the tip, you got the base, you got the shaft. If one of those three pieces fail, it fails. Guess what? It didn't. They all work cohesively. They fed off each other, and they were able, to really, and I've probably said this before, this is the first victory won in a modern age of terrorism. They gave their lives. And I tell you what, their motivation, in my opinion, was to go home and have dinner with their family. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Because, you probably get this too. They always say, hey, did your brother make a phone call? You don't know my brother, because he wouldn't. He's not going to tell you what he's going to do. He'll tell you it afterwards. But when it's coming time to action, and I think all of them are the exact same way. So it's amazing that those 40 individuals were able to get over that shock. First off, here you are, the guy's telling you got a bomb on the plane, and they got, they probably seen somebody that was killed in front of them for that fear and that deterrent to keep you, hurtled back in the plane. This is just Ken Nacke's view on what I believe happened on Flight 93. They were able to gain information. They were able to process that information. And the most democratic thing they did was they voted on it. And all 40 of them, and they fed off of each other, and they acted. You know what I mean? They said, not today, not tomorrow, not never. This is not happening on my watch.
Listen, we're standing here next to your brother's name, Walt. Can you tell us the significance of the Superman that placed?
Well, we lived actually 80 miles away from here when my brother was 5 years old. We lived right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Monroeville, on Hialeah Drive. He was a big fan of Superman and the Incredible Hulk, as an adult, that he collected the comic books. Well, at 5 years old, we're in the basement running around like a bunch of animals, and he ties his blue towel around his neck like it's the cape from Superman, and he's running around the basement. Now, you're talking back, it was a long time ago. Screen doors had tempered glass, not tempered glass, just glass. You know what I mean? Not plastic like they are now.
I think I know where the story's going.
Yeah. Well, He thought he was Superman and he dove through the plate glass window. But 5 years old, he got stuck. So what's our natural reaction? Pull back. Well, he sliced the back of his tricep, 104 inches, just missed his brachial artery. That should have killed him. It didn't. So he had a huge scar that compassed the whole backside of his arm. So he's an adult later, he's got boys, and you know what I mean? And he's thinking about it. We always talked about it. So it wasn't like you never saw his big scar on the back of his arm. So he got that Superman tattooed above his scar in the remembering of being the joy of a 5-year-old boy and his fondness for collecting comic books. So I'm out here one day and I'm thinking to myself, I like how the beauty of it is, but the Wall of Names, in my opinion, doesn't really tell the story of the individual. With one thing in my mind, what could I put out here? This is my thinking, is that you could see it and you're going to ask questions about why is that there. So kind of what could I put out here that would represent my brother? And I came up and found that somewhere, and it's been out here for about 1.5 years now. So it's kind of fitting of who he is. And all of them. You know what I mean? It's in under his name, but I have nothing but the greatest respect for all 40 of these individuals, because I always tell, for me, I always ask my question. Every time I come here and I drive through the gates coming up through the front by the Tower of Voices, I ask myself, would I have done what they did? Could I have done it? Those are the two questions I always ask myself, and I always answer it the same way. Yes, I could have. And that goes for all of us. And that's what's so important about this memorial. About what an individual can do, what 40 individuals did as one. Powerful, powerful stuff.
Have you met the 40 families?
Yes.
All 40?
Yes.
That's great. Now, for those of you that are not watching, you're just listening, can you kind of just, what are we seeing here? I think you'd be probably best to describe, what does this site look like to you?
It's actually, like I said, when we talked earlier, this is actually a national park with a memorial component. We're actually standing in the memorial component side. And what the Park Service does a great job, and what the Paul Murdoch did in designing it is, everything works off the flight path of Flight 93. Through the cockpit data recorder and device recorder, they were able to get precise information. So what we're actually standing on right now by the Wall of Names is the actual flight path. This is, one of the last, places before Flight 93 reached the impact site by that rock that they saw in the distance earlier. So it's all in a straight line. So where the visitor center is, the learning center is, and the overlook to the flight path, all plays on the line of the flight path of Flight 93.
That's what we're standing on. For those of you
Yes.
that are watching, what you see here, right here, this is the actual flight path right prior to the actual the crash site, which is directly to our
Right.
left.
And right now it's we have granite blocks, all engraved with the names of the 40 heroes of Flight 93 in alphabetical order. You know what I mean? And because it's their lives. You know what I mean? I always come over here, and like I said, I kind of stayed by myself, and I really like to talk to people out here when I'm out here, but I'll always come over here, man. I'll always, you rub his name, you kiss it, say hi, not goodbye, say hi. Miss you. Your boys are doing great. You know what I mean? You ought to see this, you ought to see that. My kids are doing this, my sister's kids are doing that. Even though they're watching over us, it kind of refreshed that kind of stuff. But it's moving, because here's 40 individuals that did the ultimate team sport. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I mean, especially coming from the background that you guys have. It's the ultimate team sport.
You keep referring to that. For those of you who are listening, and I explained earlier before we went live that a lot of people don't know the story of Flight 93 and why it really is a story of heroism. Where was that plane going? Just for those who don't know.
Well, if you go listen to the 9/11 Commission book, its primary target, they had two. They had the White House if it was looking good, but it was the U.S. Capitol. So you got to remember, it was a well thought out plan. You know what I mean? They were going to take out financial, take out military, and take out your government. That was the plan, whether it was going to be 10 planes, 20 planes, or 4 planes, however the scale was, but their whole focus was to attack those backbones of our government and our country. You know what I mean? But also, it's where they were starting to use civilian targets. You know what I mean? It wasn't terrorism on a government building or a military site or the USS Cole, which led up to 9/11, back, in October of 2000. So all those things, when you tell the story of it, it's kind of hard not to look at the bigger picture. And so I kind of lost my train of thought.
So this was the only plane that didn't reach its target on 9/11.
Correct.
Right? And you had mentioned earlier that this was the first counterattack of Americans against our now enemy.
Right.
Just a few weeks later, we had the Green Beret and our CIA intel analysts on the ground in Afghanistan. This sight to so many, as you said again earlier, was the first time that America struck back. What does that mean to you, knowing that your brother was on that plane?
When I first started this process, the world, you know what I mean? That's, like I said, how it goes back to what my dad taught us growing up. My dad was in the Navy, you know what I mean? And the military teaches their soldiers a certain way. He taught us that. But it also opened my eyes out what 40 did. And, I had to look beyond myself, had to look beyond my brother, because there's 39 other people that were involved in it, and they had families. And that's why I said, I think their drive was, I think any of it's all we need, is I just want to go home and have dinner with my kids, you know what I mean, or tuck them in. There's so many things that we miss in our professional lives, especially being in law enforcement, that the burden on our spouses have with our children. You know what I mean? I hate to say it, when you start going up and taking certain jobs, family life, almost takes a back seat to your primary. So coming here, it just shows me what they did, is how important that is, that, like you just said, it was the first counterstrike back. You know what I mean? And then I still say, you walk away from here is you can say, I would do what they've done. I could have done it, and I would have done it. And also, not today, not tomorrow, not never. So it always goes back to see something, say something, even to this day. Because if you go from 1993 to 2000 to 2001, that's a patient adversary. And I think you'd be foolish to think that something like this can't happen again. So you got to be diligent. So, and I think the generation that has not lived through this needs to be taught that lesson to a degree, that there's nothing wrong with seeing something, saying something, and be diligent in what you do. That's what this memorial does. And I also think that's what the Pentagon does, and that's what the events up in New York. It just shows you that an individual, your life matters, and you can change someone else's life. That's important. All the struggles that we've gone through, like I was telling you earlier, there's things that I've seen in my career that I have done that every now and then just turn around and jump up and bite me in the ass. You know what I mean? And you have that nightmare. You wake up in that cold sweat.
So
Yeah, all of us do it. Like I said, I'm no stranger to that, and I'm not special. You know what I mean? I try to deal with it as best I can. You know what I mean? Where, like I said, when I made them, I think for me now, looking back, that I'm retired and seeing my daughter and seeing my son and coming out here and talking to different groups, is I really never gave it the time to grieve the passing of my brother or my father, because I was just so driven to learn. And, no disrespect to New York, was to make sure that these 40 people were known, that, you know what I mean, it got the attention that it deserves. Because when you think about it, this is amazing stuff. A lot of people don't know this happened within 30 minutes. From the hijacking to the information gathering to preventing that plane from reaching its intended target.
Let's talk about the information. I think that's such a really big aspect of this story. But again, a lot of people don't know that by the time that plane had taken off, to the time it crashed, it was only about 46 minutes or so.
But it was late. It was late taking off. So
Right.
that's why it wasn't, which is New York traffic. I guess you guys flying out of Newark know about the plane.
Sure.
So that gave the passengers and crew members of Flight 93 the additional time that the planes that struck the World Trade Center and the Pentagon didn't have.
Now they're getting phone calls, or they're making phone calls
And
saying our plane's hijacked. And now the people on the ground, their loved ones, are telling them, well, 2 planes had just struck the World Trade Center and a plane just hit the Pentagon.
And your plane's going to be used as a weapon.
Right.
So this is where that great, getting over that initial shock and saying, not me. I can tell you right now, I don't need a phone call from my brother to tell me what he's going to say. Because he, this is going to sound crass, he was afraid of no man. You know what I mean? We're men. You know what I mean? He was not afraid of one. So it would not take for him, and I'll bet you a lot of those people on that flight that day, and I'm going to say all 40 of them, I don't care what age you were, sex, or, you know, or anything like that. I think when that survival, that protection, because you remember, they are now protecting us, not themselves. They're giving themselves so they can protect. That makes sense?
You know, they saved countless lives on the ground.
Could you imagine what our country would look like today if that plane reached the U.S. Capitol or the White House? Let that sink in. I mean, for your viewers, think about it. Where would we be today if it actually reached its intended target? These people should be memorialized and cherished forever, because we are fortunate enough that we can live like today is like September 10th, where our government is still standing. That's huge. And I can't say with any more conviction than that. Is just that they gave their lives so we can continue to live it. So my suggestion is try to make the most of it while we're here on this earth.
That's fantastic. And we know for a fact that those passengers and crew members struck fear into the hearts of the hijackers, because you could hear it on the black box. You could hear the hijackers, terrorists, screaming that the passengers are making their way towards the cockpit.
I listened to the cockpit voice recorder. I was lucky enough to be one of the family members that got to listen to it. And I don't like to discuss, I won't go into detail what I heard, but what I can tell you is when you heard their voices, there was no fear in it. It was determination.
No, I mean, fear that their plan had been.
Oh, they were done.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm talking about
no
the
fear.
passengers, the crew
Right, no
members.
fear, the
You know what I
passengers,
mean? There was no panic. There was no fear. You know how there is, you get that calmness. You know what I mean? Even under the stresses of tournament, you guys can know, and anybody that's in the law enforcement knows once you cross that threshold that you have that and that drive. You hear that. You actually hear them engage the guy who was guarding the door. Guess what? He didn't survive that encounter. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that determination. So I'm not trying to take away anything from any other side or anything that's happened in this world, but these 40 people that are behind me, truly amazing.
Yeah.
Truly, and I can't say that enough, and I can't stress that enough. And for a generation that doesn't know it, just really take a look at the course of our country, the direction it's going in today, and then imagine it without a government.
Right.
That, you know, count our blessings that those 40 individuals were on. That's why I said, not a divine intervention guy, but those 40 individuals served a purpose. And I tell you what, they prevented that plane from reaching its intended target, and that's huge.
Yeah, Flight 93 is truly a story of heroes. Yeah, I think that's the title of this episode, Story of Heroes. That's really what it is. It's just an unbelievable story. And again, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad that the story needs to be told. It needs to always be told. And again, we always go with the saying of never forget. And unfortunately, I think that this area, because like New York City, you said you don't want to, we're not trying to say anything negative against New York City, but the Twin Towers take, it seems like precedent over what happened here, but that's not the case.
But like I said, you can't tell the story without telling the story about the three sites. Exactly. And that's what we do here at the memorial. When you're up at a visitor center, you'll actually see the timeline. World Trade Center, 1, World Trade Center 2, the Pentagon, then Flight 93. Flight 93's marking right there is 10:03. You know what I mean? Flight 93 had, and not the luxury is the wrong word, the timing, that they took off 45 minutes late, were able, that family members that knew that their families were able to reach out. And then, they reached out, gained that information. Like I said, it's huge. What do you do with that information that you got it? Okay, guess what they did? They said, we're going to do something. Okay, then let's vote on it. It's democratic. You think about it.
Yeah.
But it happens in 30 minutes. We've been talking here for about an hour. They've already defeated the terrorists on Flight 93, and the plane didn't reach its target in the time that we've been talking here. Put that in perspective.
Yeah.
Going through that emotional, like I said, I can only imagine the stress that they were under. You know what I mean? The hijacking, the possibility of seeing someone murdered in front of you. Getting over it. So that might take hours in certain situations. 30 minutes, guys. I mean, I can't be no prouder than those 40 people. And like I said, when I started being involved in the memorial process, it was all about keeping Joey's memory alive. I'm doing that, but it's also, I got to keep the other 39 because they were all one. And I'll always say this to the day I die, it's 40, it's not one, it's not 39, it's not 5, 10, 15. It's 40 individuals acting as one.
You say your brother's buried in Valley Forge. You're feeling more here, right? He's here.
Yeah, when I'm here, like I said, like most people is, you know what I mean, all of them. And like I said, we all go through our dark days. And I can tell you probably 5 years after I was involved in a memorial process, since I live in Baltimore, I'm only 3 hours away. So I came up for a meeting. So I always come and pay my respect to the 40 when I came here. So I'm actually sitting out, where we were filming in the very beginning, those benches, I was sitting there by myself. Next thing you know, it was a strong moment for me. What made me heal. I watched 2 bear cubs come running out of the tree line and start fighting right in the center of the impact site. Nothing's there, no rock, no nothing like that. It's just an open field that's covered in grass. The next thing I know, so the first thing that pops in my mind is, where's Mama Bear?
Oh yeah.
Right? Second thing,
Cooking dinner while the
yeah. So then I watched them start fighting each other. They were actually playing with each other, fighting in the impact site. And it comes to me as, like I said, he's my older brother. Brought me back to when we were young and we're fist fighting in the basement or wrestling in the basement. And it didn't bring a tear to my eye. It actually made me smile and laugh. And then, it was a moment for me. What made me turn was the land is healing. The country is healing. Because we're talking, it's 5 years removed now. And also, the wildlife is coming back. It's time for me to move on. I haven't. Or else I wouldn't be here today. You know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is, it showed me life does go on. And how do I best honor his memory? Is by being the person that he wanted to be and my dad to be.
You're doing a damn good job of doing
So,
that.
like I said, I saw you inherited that role. You know what I mean? Because I also look at it, if roles were reversed, if I was on Flight 93 and my brother was out here, what would he do? Because I want to be respectful of what I think he would want to do and what my mom and dad would want. You know what I mean? I could tell you what, my brother would be the loudest guy in the crowd. No ifs, ands, or buts. And he'd be doing what I'm doing.
It's a great representation of the Superman statue being there. There
Yeah, he was. I'll tell you what, he was loved by many. Yeah.
Well, sir, I think this has been an unbelievable episode, and I can't thank you enough for coming out here, driving all the way from Baltimore, about 3 hour drive. Right?
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's better than coming from New York.
This is like a home away from home. I've been very fortunate when it comes to the memorial process because I got picked early on to be one of the federal advisory commissioners that oversaw the planning, design, the construction for the process from the start to the beginning. I got nominated, I got vetted, and I got picked. There's only 15 of us from the whole country.
Wow.
And I tell you what, that was, like I said, this has been true labor of love. You know what I mean? And there's no more love for those 40. I said, not just my brother, but I love them all. And then it's that important. And like I said earlier, Flight 93 was not their defining moment in their lives. It was just the ending of their lives. They were amazing individuals beforehand. And that's what you need to know, because it leads up to what they did. Does that make sense?
100% makes sense. We do this at the end of every episode. Final words. What's the last thing that you want all of our listeners to know, to hear, to see?
I always say, love them, cherish them for generations to come. Learn about Flight 93. See that, their lives mattered and our lives mattered. I think that's when you walk away from here. That's what I hope you take away from here, that you are just as important as they are. And what, like I said, see something, say something. And it's a true honor. You know what I mean? I know what you guys walked through. We walked in the same shoes, so to speak, in the same paths in life, and with the scenes that we've seen. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's things I wish I had changed, to grieve a little bit more to this process here. But, I'm very fortunate I get to be surrounded by family. The park services, I call them part of my family. And when I talk to them, I always call them brother. You know what I mean? And this goes from the maintenance guys, it goes from the staff, it goes from the rangers to the ambassadors out here who are volunteers. You know what I mean? There are so many people willing to tell the story of Flight 93 there's so many resources out there. Learn about it, because all of it, all September 11th is history book stuff in my mind. Flight 93, the Pentagon, and what happened up in the World Trade Center, history book stuff, and it should be taught because it shows you that commitment, that drive, that responsibility that you have, and putting others before yourself. I think that's what truly, when you walk away from here, I hope you would say you can put other people above yourself, because they do.
that I can see about that.
I think that's a great way to end the show. But, well, Kenny, listen, again,
My pleasure.
yeah,
Thank you for letting me talk about
this has
them.
been great, and again, a shout out to the Parks. If it wasn't for them, Steve over there, turn the camera around real quick. Let's get a shot of him, because that you'll be hearing from that man later today. But if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here today. So again, thank you for allowing us to do this, and thank you more than anything for being here, taking all of our viewers and listeners on this roller coaster ride. It's a lot of ups and downs, but I think, just like you said, at the end of the day, put others above yourself.
Yeah.
Because that, as a country, I think we need to do that a lot more.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me share it. You know what I mean? You guys having the, the point and the reach where I don't have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Well, now you're gonna get. If you are you on social media?
No, I am not. I just
We'll
fly
talk to your
under
daughter
the
about it. Maybe she gets
I
stuck.
fly under the radar.
We'll start your own TikTok page. So with that
No.
being said,
It's my honor. Believe it's an honor, pleasure to giving me the opportunity to share their story with your audience and yourself.
thank you. Can't thank you enough. Can't thank you enough. And to everyone that's watching and back home and listening, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching and supporting the Muscle Room podcast. And we'll be seeing you soon. This is the first of about 5 different episodes that we're going to be shooting here at the Memorial. And we've got a lot more coming from New York City in the coming days. So make sure to pay attention, to listen, to give us a follow, and a like, and a share. We appreciate all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. God bless America.
Take a shot.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then we'll take a group shot.